I'm Brittany Meyer, I teach science.
I'm Stacy Cooper, I teach social studies.
I'm Zach Plattner, I teach English right here.
We're planning to just keep this really informal tonight. We wanted to kind of hear your questions on what you guys have about reassessment, about our reassessment policies, and then any of the other employability skills as well, which is something that obviously we're very jazzed about. I'm excited to continue to introduce to the community, to all of you. But we're gonna start with just some questions. So, take it away if you guys have.
Yeah, we do have a presentation as a resource. If you'd like us to go through that information, we're happy to do that, but especially with some people coming at the February meeting, if we want to just start with questions or have it entirely be questions, we're absolutely good with that.
Focus
You
on
look like-
reassessment, okay, I just, 'cause you guys
Reassessment
were
or
all.
employability skills,
Okay,
yes.
'cause you heard those were kind of my, like,
Yes.
observations that, and it's just.
Can
really-
I, actually, this is rolling, but I wanna go, Stephanie Bartles and I collected data on the,
Let me pull it up.
yeah, if you wanna click over that slide. We collected data this last semester because we had to present to the school board on some of the questions and concerns that were presented by the community. And so we collected data on all of our current semester students and how many students had the opportunity to reassess, and of those opportunities, how many took advantage. And this is where we ended up putting that. So this is all of the current physical science students and biology students. So that's a significant portion of our high school body. On the y-axis is the number of students. I know the values are hard to see, but it goes up to 80, right here 60. And then on the x-axis, it's the percentage of reassessment opportunities that the student actually used. Okay, so we looked at it on the individual student basis. 60-something students took advantage 0 times of a reassessment. 1 student took advantage every single time. So while I totally understand your concern that there are students that are lazy students, aren't we just allowing them to be lazier? Because I think that's what was brought to our attention. We are just not seeing that. Because like the students had even echoed, the lazy students are gonna continue to be lazy in whatever capacity, and we will beg them. I am constantly begging them to reassess. Because ultimately, like Alan had, or Mr. Rudick had said next door, the consequence for not doing the work is doing the work. If they're not doing it, they're gonna come back and see me again, until they eventually do it. So I totally understand the concern, we're just not seeing that in our actual students.
Are you guys finding that it's strapping you guys time-wise more or less?
Well, it's more work initially, to develop the reassessments, right? Cause they're not coming in and saying, I'm gonna reassess. Well, now we have to come up with additional work, time to work with those kids, and now we don't just give them the exact same assessment,
Right.
because that wouldn't be authentic. So initially, that takes a lot more time. Once you get into the groove of doing it, it becomes part of your normal. But innately, it's gonna be more time, because you have to find time either in your classroom time, of work time, to work with those kids one-on-one, or it's pulling them in during homeroom, or if they can't meet during that time, it's during nutrition break or before school or after school.
Do you also feel that you're reaching the kids better in this type of format?
I feel like those that want to be reached and want that help are getting that opportunity, and that is much more satisfying than saying, no, you didn't perform how you wanted to perform, or perform to your future potential, so we're cutting you off. That learning opportunity is done.
Are you finding that you're doing the extra credit homework any longer? I mean, that was a big thing if kids weren't, getting the grade that they wanted. They would find a way to do extra credit for the class to get that passing grade.
Extra credit doesn't exist anymore in this system.
How long have we had that policy?
A couple years ago.
Yeah.
2013.
Extra credit does exist,
Okay.
even though we're being told it's not.
Not in a standards-based classroom. The extra credit work doesn't get tacked on to a grade. The extra credit work is the work that you would do,
There's extra credit on exams, is where.
not to our knowledge. Because for a standards-based assessment, you can meet the expectations. You can't go, and it depends upon the class format. If they're on a incomplete 1, 2, 3, or if they're on an incomplete 1, 2, 3, 4, whether the 4 is the expectation that Mr. Rudig is expecting, or if the 3 is my expectation, they can't go above that number.
I wonder if that's the confusion there. It's a class that's using a 4,
It could be.
with the 4 being exceeding, if that would be considered extra credit.
It's not, yeah, it's not.
I mean, it's a misnomer, but I wonder if that's
It's just one of the
what's
things that I
being
bring up to my
termed.
kids is that no more extra credit, and then when they get it, they always come home and like, here's my extra credit again, and here's this exam with this extra credit, look at this whole entire page of what I can do for extra credit, it's like,
So extra
Okay.
credit in the sense that then they go from a 2 to a 3, or extra credit in the sense that like now they have like a 95%? Like is it in like a regular, you know, traditional class, or?
one of them's in pre-calc.
Well, pre-calc isn't a standards-based class.
Okay.
So yeah, so that could be part of it. I
Okay.
mean, not to say that we're trying to eliminate that, because you obviously recognize that there are flaws in the system of allowing extra credit to buffer a grade or to increase a grade. But in a truly standards-based classroom, extra credit doesn't exist.
Well, and to address one of your questions about, does it take more time to, for instance, sit down, have that conference, assign some work in order the student isn't just retaking an assessment with the same base of knowledge and very likely going to do poorly again. Maybe having to do, create a new assessment so that they're not taking the exact same test again. Yeah, it is, but it's good work, like, I genuinely enjoy those conversations. There are a lot of aha moments where there's a skill that the student you're sitting across from, they didn't get it until they have that conversation, they do a little more practice, and then they just, literally the light bulb moment happens, and it's nice to see, and the students who do retakes, the vast majority see improvement, usually dramatic improvement, so.
So I love that. I love that kids are actually learning. It's not like you take the test and too bad, so sad, we're moving on. But how can you allow students to really show that they're exceptional and to do more than just what's expected? Is there a way that you're able to do that for students?
And I think that comes down to us as teachers. I mean, differentiation shouldn't look I don't wanna say any different, but differentiation should be happening in any classroom, whether it's graded traditionally or if it's standards-based. So if you raise the expectations for that student to meet a 3, maybe their expectations are a little bit higher because you know what they're capable of, or you're expecting them to go on a deeper level on a particular unit or content. So I think differentiation can still occur, or should still be occurring, no matter which grading system or how you're reporting that score out.
Yeah, and I would hold to the response that, in a high school career, students should be challenging themselves by taking, say, those college level courses, or in the case of like American Studies, it's not, strictly speaking, college level, but it's definitely more challenging than their other option as a freshman. So they do that, and certainly there are other opportunities in terms of co-curriculars to show, other skills like leadership.
Not just that, but also that's where the employability skills come in. That's where they have those options to be showing that on standard 7.1, 7.2. Which Brittany will bring up for us. So that's where the employability skills come in. A student who might have to reassess is not gonna score quite as well on their employability skills. So these are 2 employability skill standards that we have, respect and responsibility. These are currently being piloted by several of our teachers in the building, and more will be coming next year that are piloting these. So this is, Brittany, can we actually go back one?
Yep.
So this slide breaks down the difference between a content standard and employability skill standard. With our content standards, we really want to be demonstrating for you as a parent and to our students what they know and what they can do. That's what our content standards are all about. Versus our employability skill standards are the pieces that go into that. Are they turning in their work on time? Are they working well with their peers? Are they putting all the pieces together? Are they really learning, or are they just phoning it in? That is where we as a staff are able to visually show all of these things that we're we're talking about right now in these two standards. These standards will also be reported out on their transcripts, which will be going to colleges. I don't know if you guys remember with the St. Norbert's representative, she said in that corner box, she said, these are great. I would really look at these. Those are our employability skills. So it's a different way of showing you where your student is. Here's where your student is academically with their content standards, and then here's where they are with their employability skill standards, which are two different skills, but they really have to go together to make a successful student.
And also with like the time component, that the university representatives were talking about how like if I don't have to reassess all the time, I have that extra time. So one of the things that I've truly enjoyed about standards-based learning is the fact that it gives students ownership over their grade. They're not so much necessarily dependent on me anymore telling them, you have an 85%. Well, what does an 85% really mean? Like they can see the standards, they can see how they're doing on each of the standards, and those that don't need to necessarily reassess all the time, they have that extra time then to differentiate themselves. They can join, the paper and write, stories for the paper. They can do more tutoring and differentiate themselves among other students with those extracurriculars that they're doing. They have time to volunteer in the community and volunteer for their church. So they're taking the ownership over their own differentiation and making themselves stand out versus me having to give them those opportunities. They're able to do that on their own with that time.
Which makes a better holistic student, which is what all of our universities were saying that they're looking for. They want a more holistic student. Yes, it's awesome if our student has all threes, that's what we want. But we also want to produce students who are great at these things. And those that are excelling at academically, they can take more time to work on these things. They can step themselves out of their box and do an extra co-curricular that maybe student A can't do because they're busy reassessing. So they can differentiate themselves in different ways. And our universities just told us they're looking for those things. The grades matter, but so does the student as a whole.
I have a question about how does respect responsibility appear on the transcript? Because right now, maybe I'm missing the second page, I have Rachel's transcript for her first semester, and those aren't on there yet. Are those coming?
Yeah, they're not, because so few of us are piloting it currently, it's not gonna show up currently.
And does just respect and responsibility, will that appear, or will all the bullets underneath? And the reason I ask that is because the example she was referring to is not our transcript, it was the main transcript that she was looking at, and when you read those are really great, those 5 components. I personally like them, because when I'm looking at hiring people, those are the exact sorts of things I want to see skills in. Respect, responsibility, they're not as descriptive, perfect word, as these are. So I would think, keep looking at those and decide, are those really the right ones, or should there be some others that are on here as well?
What do you say to the bullets underneath respect and responsibility? Are those more in line with your expectations?
Yeah, more detail, because like respect, I mean, it's just like you said, more descriptive, like some of these here, like clear and effective communicator, self-directed and lifelong learner, creative and practical problem solver, responsible and involved citizen, integrated and informed thinker.
And this is one of the more recent developments we've had in terms of standards-based learning. So any feedback you have, we would be welcome to hearing it in terms of things you think that are assets to a graduate or someone that you are looking to hire. We would welcome any suggestions, because this is not set in stone, we are just,
Right.
there's several of us that are
That's
piloting
good.
it.
I definitely would look at that a little bit more, look at some of these, I know like Winnicott has 3, and when I read, I can't remember off the top of my head, I read those, I'm like, I like that better than just respect and responsibility, so.
I really like the respect and responsibility, because I think at this age, that's what kids need. And they can always become a clear and effective communicator, but if they don't have respect, they don't have the clear and communicator.
I'm not saying remove those, I'm saying look at, should there be some more on there?
I like them.
I do too. My question is, you can assess on them, but are you adding to your curriculum to help students actually gain these skills? Or are you just assessing whether they have them or not?
I don't know if we're to the point where we've added to our curriculum, but they definitely receive feedback. For those that have them built into the rubric, they definitely receive feedback. I'm one of the teachers that is piloting this, so on my rubric, if it's assessing them on respect and responsibility, it'll have a breakdown of specifically, what am I looking for? So that on the feedback for areas of growth, or areas of where they're succeeding, I can circle or point out exactly what they've done well or what they need to improve on in the future. But that's a good,
I
That's
just
good
have a
feedback
kid
for
who's
us.
not necessarily always so good at some of these things,
Sure.
you know? And I just feel like in general, not just Chilton, but everywhere, that's something that we expect kids to have, and some kids are good at school, like they're good at those sorts of things, and there are other kids that just aren't. And I don't know that we always do enough to help kids learn those skills.
that's a great point.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some, work to be done on these. I know some of us have made kind of like a window of time that something is due, because due dates are hard for students of this age with all of the extracurriculars and work and whatnot that they have to do. So like, I know one of the things that I try to do is I say, this is the window of time that needs to be turned in. So then if it's someone who gets really anxious by due dates, like they might wanna take care of it right away, whereas someone, might say, well, I know I have a basketball game this day, I have to work this day, so I'm gonna turn it in this time. So I mean that, trying to be more flexible that way with the students, cause they're busy, we're all busy, but, I hear what you're saying, like trying to work more of that into the curriculum too.
And I think a lot of this comes from the one-on-one conversations that we have with our students as well. A lot of that feedback that we give them is not just written, it's also done in individual conversations that we're having with our students. If we have a student who's chronically turning things in late, we have conversations with them and we say, hey, what's going on here? Is there something else that's making this happen? Or how do we go about fixing this for the future? Can we lay out, do you need a planner? Do we need to figure out a system for you? Do you need check-ins? We try to do those things as Mrs. Rudick was famously asking us about.
I know, you
What
know
do we
what
do? What do we do
Okay.
to improve those skills? We don't just wanna assess them, we wanna help them to improve too, and I think a lot of that comes from those individualized conversations.
Yeah, and those are things that don't change overnight, so. Well, it's not a bad
15
idea.
years.
Yeah, so the constant, reporting of those things, the conversations, just on a daily basis, that's how it starts to change over years, yeah.
I have a question about something that we talked about at the last meeting in February. I think you guys had said that, as of right now, that score was not part of the GPA.
Correct.
And so though, but we also had a lot of discussion last time about differentiation. And a comment was made, well, that score helps differentiate your students. And so that made me, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, if it's not part of the GPA, it doesn't tie into differentiation there. And I just connected those dots, so I'm just thinking out loud a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm interpreting this correctly, but I think academic differentiation and students separating or differentiating themselves by turning things in on time would be different, for me personally. If a student is one of those students that needs to be pushed or challenged, from an academic standpoint, that's the differentiation that falls on me, but like Stacy had pointed out, they can also take some responsibility for that. But this type of differentiation, showing themselves, showing you as parents, showing IHEs in the future, I am routinely in every class respectful and responsible. I think that will really stand out, even if it's not affecting the academic GPA, because I think having those two separate will really be telling of a student. Is their academic GPA high, or their standards GPA high, and is their respect and responsibility scores high as well? Because some students might not have, like you said, those students that are constantly doing the retakes. You're gonna see maybe their academic scores or standard scores, GPA, will be higher, but under respect and responsibility, colleges will be able to see that if they have a lower score. Because there are I can speak to the fact that I have some students that score really high, but it might be because it took them a little longer, or they're just always turning things in late, and you can see that noticeably on the score sheet.
mentioned something about some classes had a 3-point scale and some had a 4-point. This is my first meeting, so I'm not familiar with that.
So, sure.
Or, we got Mr. Rubin.
Yeah, we
here.
do.
Yeah.
So currently, Alan and Mr. Delbrew as well?
Yeah.
In the math department are using the 4-point scale, as part of their pilot in their classrooms. And, last year was my first year truly piloting, biology, and through those experiences that I had, I felt more comfortable assessing students on a 3-point scale. So that's why I'm a incomplete 1, 2, 3. So through the piloting process, we're kind of figuring out what works best for us, and in the hope or the future is to have a consistent scale.
So then, because it sounded like you guys were going on here to a 3-point scale, and then we were trying to translate it over to a 4-point GPA.
That is the plan.
Yes.
Thinking that eventually everybody's gonna be on the 3-point scale, and then it'll all transfer over, or
Yes.
yeah.
It's a relatively recent decision.
I can say as a parent though, honestly, a 4-point scale makes a lot more sense, with what we're used to in this world. Understanding of 4.0 and what that means, it is pretty confusing, how to be a 3-point converting and all that.
If we went with the 4-point, would we eliminate the issues we're seeing with, like on here, a 2.9 in the 3-point scale is translating over to a 3.6 in the GPA of the 4-point scale? It seems like it will be harder for the kids they'll almost be penalized. Like if they would have gotten something in the 4-point scale, they're gonna be a little less in the 3-point scale. So if we're trying to then compete for scholarships or whatever, our kids at Chilton might have less chance at something just because it's translating differently. Now, forgive my math brain because it's not a good one, but I'm just wondering if we could somehow switch the scale would it make it easier
So to speak to my experience and why I made the switch, because I had been 100% on the 4-point scale. We would actually, in my class, be doing a disservice to my students at least, by saying that all of my students are being assessed at the exceeding expectations. Because most students are not gonna meet a 4 in my classroom. If that's truly exceeding the standard, most students aren't gonna get to a 4. Most of my students are gonna get to a 3, which is what the state standard recommendations are for a 10th grade biology student. So then we would see an effect in the overall GPA, because a majority of the students are gonna fall in the 3 and 2 range, and very few are gonna get to that 4. So that's part of why I made the switch.
This might be a good segue too, because our next session is grading scale, and they do have a presentation, so maybe their slides and discussion will help clarify some of your questions.
Yeah, I would just add that while I only started piloting this year, I heard that exact same argument from one of my English coworkers. She had started on a 4 last year, this year switched to a 3, said, if you're gonna start this year, start with a 3. That's what works for those reasons.
As a parent, I've had mixed feelings about the 0 to 3 and 0 to 4, because in 8th grade, my daughter had a 4-point scale. And, where 3 meets the standards and then 4 exceeds. Well, for her, nothing's acceptable but the 4, okay? And so from a mental health perspective, not healthy for her at all, to think 3 is unacceptable. So thus then, I like the 0 to 3 scale for that reason. However, then I don't have differentiation either. So there's a trade-off, and so for me, I am much more comfortable with the 0 to 3 scale as a parent versus the 0 to 4, and I think there's a lot of high achieving students who would be similar to my daughter, who that 4 is the only acceptable score, and they will not feel good about themselves unless they have a 4.
They might be touching on this in the next group, but we are talking about ways to show students that do exceed the expectation or exceed the standard.